Changes in the schedule.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I still feel the challenge of being a parent now in today's world is immense. I think that you need support.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Don't be afraid to take that step. Like, don't be afraid to get help, because you might think that you know what you're doing, but it's always okay to have extra support, and don't do it alone.
Give it a try. You got nothing to lose. It's free. I'm grateful that I took advantage because it's something that has put me in touch with my child, or closer to my child and her development.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I think that as a parent now, I'm grateful for support more than I was before.
So
I
it's,
filled out that form
April
not knowing
24th, 2024. I'm going to call the General Government Committee meeting to order. Lily, could you conduct the roll call?
Chair Hashak,
Here.
Supervisor McCordy.
Here.
Okay, and I'm going to look to Sarah McBurney to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So good morning, everybody. First off, we're going to do item 2A, which is discussion and possible action, including providing recommendations to staff and a referral to the Board of Supervisors recommending approval of the County of Mendocino Cannabis Department monthly update for February 2020. Okay, I'm going to turn to Sarah McBurney.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager with Mendocino County Cannabis Department. If I may, I would like to address items 2A and 2B at the same time this morning.
Very good.
Okay, so diving right in, for our February activity report, we had a total in program of 699 applications, with 461 of those issued and 238 remaining as under review. For the number that were issued within February, it was a total of 96. 6 of those were renewals, 13 were initial issuances, 7 were withdrawn, and 70 were denied. For our March numbers, we have a total of 695 applications in program, 202 under review, 493 issued. For the breakdown of the CCBLs processed for the month of March, it was a total of 59, with 20 renewals issued, 34 initial issuances, 5 withdrawals, and 0 denials. In our February and March report, we do have an approximation of square footage, and it's broken down by license type and the approximate square footage for cultivation. I think what's important to note for these square footage assessments is that this is the maximum amount of cultivation that could be grown if everyone cultivated their maximum license type that their license allowed. So some folks may have been issued to do 10,000 square feet, but because of their property can maybe only grow 8,000 square feet. So I do want to put in the caveat that although we're showing approximations of square footage that could be cultivated, it's really the number of square feet that we have currently issued or under review within the county. So for March, we have approximate total issued square footage is 4,958,785 square feet of issued, with another 2,104,500 under review square footage for cultivation. For our fallowing for 2023, so applicants could apply for fallowing by January 31st of this year. They needed to have a site plan submitted with the department along with their affidavit of fallowing, and it would clearly show the fallowed area, including this total square footage of both fallowed canopy and the canopy that could or will remain in use. The department processed 42 completed 2023 fallowing applications in February, and MCD staff has notified individual applicants that their fallowing application was approved. Out of all of our applications, we had 136,000 square feet of fallowed issued CCBL square footage. In March, on March 8th, the department went live with our new streamlined ordinance, and this included the start of our 5-year renewals for the program. Applicants may find a list of CCBLs on the Mendocino County Cannabis website and the expected renewal year listed alongside their CCBL number. So if applicants are logging into their Excel account and they're wondering what year they'll renew, it may not be updated yet. We're doing it as an individual process, but they should be directed and should check out our website to see potentially what year their renewal will come in. We do have the tiers listed. So tier 1 would be applicants that are going to apply within 1 year of renewal. So if they're issued in 2024, they'll expect another renewal within 2025. These were inclusive of CCBLs without an active DCC license, including Phase 3 applications, and all relocations with an unmet compliance plan. Tier 2 would be applications that need to renew in 2026, and their CCBLs under review or issued only once, so never renewed with the department, that have an unmet compliance plan and did not submit an Appendix G. Tier 3 is a renewal year of 2027 and is any remaining CCBLs not meeting the condition of any other tiers. Tier 4 is a renewal year in 2028 and is any remaining CCBLs without a compliance plan. Tier 5 is a renewal year of 2029 and is CCBLs with an active DCC license, no compliance plan, and have renewed at least once with the county. There are a few applicants that have already received their renewal license with these years, and so far we're receiving good feedback of it as well. I do want to note that some applicants may have qualified for more than one category, and in order to make sure that we have smoothing of workload and an equal distribution amongst those 5 years, the department may have put you into a different tier than you may have qualified for initially.
What exactly is the compliance plan?
If I may,
And why do some licenses not have them?
if I may, through the chair. So a compliance plan is needed if, upon review of your CCBL, we find something that may not necessarily meet current compliance, but we're trying to get you within that compliance. The biggest example would be like unpermitted structures. So you have a compliance plan, which gives you a year to get those structures permitted with the county. If you're on a compliance plan, it doesn't mean that you can cultivate or utilize those structures. It just means that you have a year to get them within compliance. So there's a couple of reasons why folks may have a compliance plan, but the goal is at the end of that year to get everyone in compliance with 10A17 and have health and safety as a priority.
Okay, I knew that, but I forgot it. So.
It's always good for a refresh. Okay. For site inspections, number of inspections completed during the month of March was a total of 13. And we had 913 miles traveled throughout the county. We are still continuing with our satellite inspections as well as our physical inspections. Currently, MCD is showing on track. The Gantt chart forecast for the end of March currently shows workload ending in September of 2024. So that means a review of all Phase 1 and Phase 2 applications will be completed, and we will have a continuation of renewals and new Phase 3 applications to continue on our workload. One thing is, as we're looking at being on track, I do want to point out that we have several applications. So there are 7 applications without compliance plans pending issuance currently. And failure to sign compliance plans per 10A17 may result in, and it does have the grounds for denial of a CCBL. So I do just want to let applicants know that as we're getting these close to issuance, the department will be communicating with applicants and we will be asking for signatures on both a sworn affidavit, and a compliance plan if applicable. And we do need those signatures for issuance, and we do need to have those signatures processed in order to adhere to our DCC deadline of December 31st, 2024. The department log jams. So we're still continuing to monitor our CDFW responses. I would say we have had pretty great communication with Angela Liedenberg. Thank you to Supervisor Hashak for leading that. And we were able to send CDFW a list of priority applications. So these would be applications that the department has deemed not less than significant. So they do require a CDFW response before we can move through with issuance. So we will continue to work with CDFW and prioritize applications that we're noting these to hopefully get responses back on. The department will continue to note and update our monthly report with any applications that may have log jams throughout that communication. Ultimately, there may come a point where, as we come near this deadline, we have several applications that are stuck in this needing CDFW responses, and the department can't move forward on them. So I do want to make sure that we're continuing to monitor and check these numbers as we get closer to our deadline.
Yeah, and I'd just like to note that You know, I appreciate CDFW and Angela Liebenberg working with us and really getting us the information we need, and vice versa, working with them. So thank you very much. And if there's anything you need from me, you know, just let me know. But I think that we have good communication going on right now. If I could just interrupt and go back to the site inspections. And there was some question about, with the fee hearing yesterday, about how much we're updating those fees, and could you speak about those?
Absolutely. So with the department's current fee schedule in Exhibit X, I do think it's worth noting that the department is consistently conducting time studies. So every time we touch an application, we log any time spent on that application within a chronology of events for that specific CCBL. So as we are moving forward, we're continuously looking at how much time things are taking us, whether it be an initial issuance, it's, you know, a renewal. We're still tightening our process in terms of our public service and being able to relate our customer service. You know, sometimes we think we're taking a quick call from an applicant about a CCBL and it turns into a 30-minute call. So being able to really log that within that chronology of events and track those things, I think, is something that the department can do better on. But currently we're still staying true at 15 hours for a renewal application and 25 for an initial application. As always, I just want to remind everyone, you know, it's, if you sit down with a CCBL and it's a brand new issuance, it's not like you can sit down and 25 hours later you're going to have a completed CCBL. There's a lot of moving parts into the review of a cannabis cultivation business license, and there's a lot of different parties that we need to gather information from. So typically these are all moving all at the same time. And so for our fee schedule, we will continue to monitor all of our activities and be able to appropriately issue any type of adjustments needed as we note differences in times throughout that fee schedule, site inspections included.
And I think that this is a lot better than the 200 hours from last year. And also, I had another point. Anyway, I'll turn to Supervisor McGordy right now.
Yes, sir. Well, things look really good compared to where we were a year ago. It's hard to believe it's the same department. But there is one thing that, of course, we're concerned of with our tough budget situation is the deficit that's in the department and the fees that we're charging. What's your take on that? And do you see this as eventually sort of evening out as we get more licenses finished, or how is that going?
If I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Our fees schedule and the department net county cost is difficult. You know, I think we are currently working on gathering time studies and being able to get accurate cost recovery for time spent on services, but there is still a large deficit that the department has and is costing the county. I do want to note that phase 1 and phase 2 applications may have had fees collected dated back to 2017. So we are still working on a workload that we are not being receiving funds for this year. So definitely, I think that's being noted. I think the other thing that comes into play here is our grant revenues. So currently the department's operating 2 separate grant revenues that we are receiving some type of revenue back to the department for. Ultimately, that grant funding will go away. And so that, you know, is going to lead to a larger net county cost as well. What we can do right now and what we are continuing to do is really just get a true, accurate representation of the cost of goods that we can give to the public, and also, you know, what our actual cost is to the county. And then from there, we can make those educated decisions about how to move forward and what's the best way for our applicants, the department, and the county to move forward as well. I don't have all the answers, but I'm hoping that through the work that we're putting in today, we can get the collective data to make the answers that we need to do to move forward.
So it seems like we're continuing to play catch up here to basically get this industry to a level of maturity where everyone's licensed and functioning legally. which is a tremendous goal in itself, and there's a lot of benefits to that. I see this as an investment by Mendocino County because we are running a deficit. But if we follow our principles that basically we have fee recovery for most of our activities, there will be a day of reckoning where probably cannabis fees will have to go up. But I'm also hoping that as more of our work is done, that the actual workload and cost for the department will go down. And I'm just curious if that trend seems to be holding true at this point.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that as we get to a point where we are caught up and the 5-year renewal cycle really comes into play and we have appropriate staffing levels, which I think we're there now, we should see this kind of balanced networked as to where we can truly identify the cost and what our fees should be. Starting next year and really at the end of September when our Gantt chart ends, that's when we will start collecting fees appropriately for workload that we're conducing in that day. And so we'll be able to really collect and accurate data. As we went to the 5-year renewal, we went from processing 800 applications per year to around 150 with our current in-program licenses. And so, you know, that has changed the direction of the department, I would say. We're processing 800 applications at 15 hours each versus 150 at 15 hour each is a much different workload. So it's allowed us to have a less than net county cost than we would have before. But I do think that ultimately something's got to give, and we have to get to a point where we are sufficient in our budgetary line items, and our revenue is currently, our fee revenue is capturing time spent, but we still have a large gap in our overhead. So ultimately, the more we can get these numbers identified and be able to create those decisions, I think it'll help.
So I also want to understand this. So part of the reason that we're running a deficit too is because of sort of legacy license collection fees that never got processed, but we still have an obligation to do them even though the money was spent long ago.
That is correct. So currently we're looking at, for the month of March, we still have 202 applications to go under review. And that is just a generalized number. That's 202. It includes a little bit of the phase 3, but phase 3 comparatively, I think, is about 16. So a large chunk of that is applications that we received funding for a long time ago. And when you look at that, 202 compared to where we started this program a year ago is a much smaller number, and I'm very proud of where the department has come, but that's our workload moving forward, right? 202, that's more than 150 that we'd be doing a year too. So we really still have, if you're, you know, that large quote unquote workload, it's a year workload ahead of us that we're capturing fees for that the department's already long gone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that whole issue with the catch-up fees that were already paid and we're still processing them is still a burden on the, or obligation that the department has to complete.
Yeah, so it helps explain the deficit, and it also gives us some hope that we'll get to a point where we're able to run a balanced budget based on fees being paid for renewals and for new licenses. So that's good news.
And like I said yesterday in the Board of Supervisors meeting, I appreciate what the department did with the fees, and you know, especially like taking out the withdrawal fee and dealing with that, because that was a concern of the public, and so really I think the department's been very responsive to the situations that are happening on the ground.
I think so as well, and I think it was the January GGC, if I'm not mistaken, where we had kind of prompted some ideas that we have for the fee schedule moving forward. And so we're still really interested in those ideas and looking at, you know, what efficiencies can be made. And truly, we want to find the middle ground here, the best situation for our applicants and the best situation for the county moving forward. You know, I think as we look at the overall cannabis cultivation within the state of California, Mendocino County's fees are still relatively cheap. And it's hard because I think a lot of times when applicants look at fees overall, we're thrown into the bucket of they have MCD fees, they have taxes due to the TTC in addition to the state license, which is a pretty expensive cost for our applicants as well. But comparatively, MCD is still on the bottom of the scale for those in terms of how much it's costing out of pocket. But we do want to find the best foot forward. We want to accurately capture our fees. We're not here to make money. We just want to make sure that we're not costing money to the county.
All right, very good. All right.
Okay, I do have a few more points. So the EIR is, we still don't have any official news that we can report on. However, the department is hopeful that we'll have news coming forward soon. And again, any specific applicants with questions regarding their individual site EIR process, please direct those questions to licensing@cannabis.ca.gov, as the DCC is the lead agency through that process.
So we still don't know if there will be public meetings or when those will be or anything like that?
Nothing official at this point. Moving into our local equity entrepreneurial program, the LEAP grant. I do have a couple numbers that I would like to report on. So the department did receive a round 5 funding through the governor's office, and the total amount we received is $1,803,929.86. The total amount within that round 5 that is available for both fee relief and direct grants is $1,445,732.80. So the other $400,000 is going to a mixed bag of its 10% funding for both direct technical assistance and administrative costs for the county to administer the grant. Out of the $1.4 million, if we were to utilize all of that money towards direct grants, we would be able to fund a total of 28 direct grants in full at $50,000 each, and then one partial direct grant, so under the $50,000. If we took that $1.4 million and allocated it all towards fee relief for our applicants, we're looking at 144 applicants assisted through fee relief at $10,000 each. For our the true-ups that we identified in previous department GGC presentations, we have allocated in past due true-ups that were identified $118,076 already allocated out of that 1.44 true-up tax relief from last year. I am looking for some input from the community as to how we want to allocate this funding. So currently, we have 276 applicants in our LEAP direct grant queue. The department will not be opening direct grant applications for local equity entrepreneurial program. We have plenty of applicants in the queue that was inherited from Elevate Impact. We would need $13.8 million in funding to give everyone in the direct grant queue funding. We do not have the funds. 86 of the current 276 applicants are deemed ineligible at this point from CEG funding due to Camp RAID being their main criterion for equity. And we, to date, just wanted to run some numbers through everyone. To date, funding through the CEG program in fee relief, we've distributed as the county $1.71 million to applicants. And in direct grants, we've distributed 81 direct grants at $50,000 a piece for a total of $3.9 million. So typically in the past with CEG funding, we've done a combination of both fee relief and direct grants. And the reason why I'm somewhat seeking community and board feedback on this is, do we build 10 direct grants at $50,000 a piece, knowing that there's still multiple applicants in the queue, over 260 at that point, and then we leave the rest open for fee relief? Or is it something where we look at more fee relief and we help as many applicants as possible, still knowing that, not everyone is going to be able to have fee relief either, because we still have more than 144 applicants that are deemed eligible through our LEAP program. So kind of wanted to open up some conversation about LEAP funding as round 5. We currently have not received our round 5 funding from GoBiz. That check is in the mail. We are in the current grant award term for that, so we can spend funds at any point once we get that money from GoBiz. And the hope is that we would open up, if appropriate, the fee relief window for applicants to start applying for fee relief from true-ups. It could be through PBS, environmental health, Mendocino County fees, up to $10,000 per applicant, or do we just process direct grants?
Yeah. Let's see, I had one question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so with the 1.8 million for the round 5 and 1.4 is for direct grants, and if we used 118 of that to cover those fee waivers from the last round, so are we down to 1.3?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, Supervisor McGordy?
So this seems like a classic case of capital rationing where you don't have enough money to do everything, so you try to do the things that are the most important. And the nexus I see is assisting people with fees, because that helps both the growers, and our money goes further in terms of individuals helped. Plus it helps the county recoup some of the deficit that we have. So I'm personally tend to lean that way, but again, not knowing all the situation on the ground and what might come in for other grant needs, I'd want to have a little bit more information before we make a decision.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I know that people have spent a lot of time and effort getting their applications in, their budgets for these direct grants. And so what do you do with when we don't have enough money to go around, even to provide fee relief for, we don't have enough money for just fee relief for everybody. So I guess I'm looking for your input, the staff's input, and also from the community to see how we deal with this situation. And my understanding is that the next round of LEAP funding is going to require a match from the county. And so at this point, we can't guarantee that the county is going to be able to match anything. So this might be it for a while. So if there's any input from the community, please share it. And when do you need this decision made by?
We're still awaiting our grant monies. The hope is that it comes in soon. I think that where the department runs into a little bit of a pinch is the annual true-ups are due by May 31st. And so we would want to make sure that if we were to open up a fee relief window, we're receptive of that date and we can process any journal entries in Munis to waive those, to relieve those taxes before May 31st in order for the TTC to properly be able to process them. I do want to touch on one thing, which is the applicants that are currently in the direct grant queue have been waiting since 2017, whenever the portal initially opened. And sometimes it's been a very long time that these applicants have been waiting in queue. As the department processed direct grant applications the last round, so in October, all of the budgets had to be updated. So every single applicant almost gets a refresh, and what the queue has done is basically held their place in line, and it's allowed the department to reach out to them to ask, what budget do you want to do? So if we were to proceed down the direct grant line, applicants that were qualified under Camp RAID, they would receive additional communication. So the department has already tried to get a hold of these folks, but it would be an individual application, like reach out to them saying, hey, we're processing your direct grant. Can we change and realign your equity criteria to something that is going to be able to be fundable? If not, that person would get skipped. But if they are able to requalify, then it would be, hey, let's work on your budget and get a new updated budget as well. So I do want to note that, some of these folks have been waiting years for processing of this direct grant. And at one point, I believe we're even promised by the department this direct grant money. So for what it's worth, I think that ultimately we're going to have some hard decisions to make. I don't think we're going to have everyone's buy-in on the decision that we move forward with. But I do want to note that it's the intent of the department to help as many people and appropriately help them in the way that we can move forward in the best way. But I do think that there's going to be applicants that are left unsatisfied with our decision.
Disappointed
Totally.
after going through that process and waiting patiently for all this time. Okay.
Okay.
I have just another comment on that. I think it's really important for the growers in need of fees, just to keep them going, having the ability to grow another day, as it were. I think that should be a kind of a priority. It doesn't mean all the money goes to them, but I feel like keeping our business as healthy as we can, so that they keep their licenses, is something that's really, really important. And True Up is a really good time to take a look at who's in need. Then as far as the other applicants go, I get their frustration. They're kind of hoping to make some improvements and be compliant with regulations and fix things that aren't right. But again, this comes down to capital rationing. Where you don't have enough money, you try to put your money where it's going to make the most good and keep the industry as healthy as possible.
And then,
if I could just add to that, with the May 31st deadline for the fee waivers, then how soon do you need us to make any kind of decision today?
I do want to just ask, so if we wait for official direction from board, our next GGC will put us too tight up against that May 31st deadline for the true up.
Right.
I'm hoping that the department does have the ability to make a decision based on what we think is right and based on the feedback we're receiving from the community as well. Like I said, I really think that ultimately folks are going to be disappointed no matter which way we move. But I do want to be mindful of that deadline as well. So the department would like the right to make the decision as to what we're thinking is right prior to the next GGC, but ultimately did want to consider feedback from both GGC board members and also the applicants and the public that comes forward as well.
What if we dedicated half of the money that we have to fee waivers, and then with the other half, we can leave it up to you to make the decision about how to proceed with that? Would that work for you?
That works for us. I mean, ultimately, how it would break out that way, we're still able to process and distribute some direct grants. It's not going to be a lot. I think half of the money left at $50,000 a piece. You're looking at a few applicants that would be helped. So it would give them direct grant assistance in addition to fee relief as well, which would be helpful for more cultivators. I think that I mean, ultimately, we're going to have to make those tough decisions and see what it is. In terms of equity throughout this program, that's how it's always been done in the past, is part fee relief, part direct grants. I think if we're just staying with our consistent equitable decision across the board, that may be the way to go.
Okay.
Okay. Really quick, I would like to give, on another note, an update about our other grant, which is our Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grant Program. So at the beginning of our direct grant applications, which opened on March 1st, we had $4.8 million available for eligible applicants. Currently, to date, as of yesterday, we've received 242 applications. Out of those direct grants that would remove duplicates, there's been a couple that have been deemed ineligible due to DCC licensure status. So you do have to have a provisional in order to proceed in getting funding for this program. It took it from 242 to 225 applicants in queue. We currently have $600,000 more to distribute, so we are looking for more applications, and the grant application is still live on our website. So we do encourage anyone that's considering to apply to please apply. We have $600,000, which equates to about 24 more full applications. We currently have processed completely through Cobblestone and gotten everyone's signature on 17 of those applications. with 2 checks sent out to applicants and more coming as our fiscal team gets ready for the next AP batch. Currently, inside and routing through the county review process is 44 applications out of the 225. So the department's continuing to work through this program and these applications daily. And then last, just as an update, the department's currently accepting tax appeals. So we held a window open, and it will be the same window moving forward, as the hope is tax appeals are processed through Excella. But we started taking tax appeal applications opening on April 1st, and we'll stop taking them at April 30th at 4 p.m. So applicants can send in their tax appeals either via USPS mail, they can come in person, or new this year, they can also submit them via email as well. We will not process email applications until a payment is made in their Excella account. Yeah, that's open and ready for applicants to apply through the 30th.
Okay, for the LJGP grants, that out of those 225, are you seeing a lot of crossover with the LEAP applicants?
In terms of the same applicants, or?
Right.
Yes, I think that a lot of our applicants currently in Mendocino County were eligible for equity status. So most of our folks in program at this point do have that equity status. So because of that, a lot of these names are duplicates. But, you know, again, the biggest thing with the local jurisdiction is they have to have that active provisional license through the Department of Cannabis Control. But yes, we are seeing duplicates on that side.
Okay, so, and the LEAP applicants get prioritization?
That is correct. So there was an element to the LJAGP program. So 25% of the funds were up for eligible applicants who were equity verified. They received priority to 25% of the funding. So we were able to shift some applicants up in their queue location based on that eligibility status.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
That's all I have for today.
All right, very good. And just going to the Gantt chart, looks like we're on track, and we're looking at maybe being able to complete the first round of applicants by August.
So yes, phase 1 and phase 2 applications on the current Gantt chart show an ending sometime in September. So it does run through September with a little bit of workload phase out in the Gantt chart.
Okay, very good. So that's all good news, and it's really nice, like Supervisor McGordy has said, to see the department running like a real department. You know, we're following the timelines, we're getting the work done, we have processes in place. Very good to see. Hey, anything else from staff? Okay, so we'll go to public comment. And if there is public comment about this issue with the LEAP money funds, direct grants, that would be appreciated.
Through the chair, if I may. We are having some microphone issues with the microphone on the dais, so please just adjust the microphone and speak clearly into it so the people on Zoom can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Thank you. This is Hannah Nelson, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to need more than 3 minutes because we covered a variety of topics. I'm going to start with the last issue first, or not the very last issue, but the LEAP funding issue first, and people in queue versus not, and how much for fee waivers versus not. And I don't have any clean answers or suggestions. I do want to point out a few things to focus perhaps the decision points. It might be most fair to set a dollar amount per possible number of people and let them do essentially a choice of mix and match of fee waiver grant amount. These people have been waiting in queue for a number of years, having applied for a direct grant. In the past, it seems like it was about a third that was set aside for fee waivers for everybody, even people who did not apply for a direct grant, but anybody who is equity eligible. So one of the questions is whether it's fee waivers or what proportion of fee waivers and direct grants, are we only looking at funding in those ways the group that's been waiting, or would fee waivers, to whatever extent they're being utilized, be opened up beyond that cohort that have been waiting specifically for direct grants? Well, I think it's not decided, it's just an open.
If I may, through the chair, the thought process that I had going into this was fee relief, and the window that's open would be applicable to anyone that was equity verified. So even those not currently in the direct grant queue, because the direct grant queue is 276, but equitable verified applicants are much more than that 276. So the thought process going into this, but again, that is a decision that we can talk about as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's really a matter of, okay, how do we spread this around, but also what are we looking at in terms of people who've been waiting in queue for a really long time versus the larger pool of equity verified applicants? I do think that if administratively there is a way to allow at least the portion of it that might be reserved, or not, I should say, might not be reserved specifically for fee waivers, so in other words, eligible for direct grants, that the people also have the choice to use a portion of that for fee waivers as well, so that they could choose, since their budgets are so out of date at this point, since they've been having to wait for years. Let's say I was number 5 in queue and I'm being offered, okay, either the full $50,000 amount or some lower amount if we're going to lower the amount for this cohort to try and serve more people. Since the fee waivers are being opened up to everybody outside of that queue, I might want to go, well, gee, I want to take my amount and spend part of it on direct grant and part of it on fee waivers. So I don't know, I certainly don't intend to suggest a further administrative burden, but I do want to say fee waivers typically, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, take less administrative time to process than direct grants, particularly with the updating of budgets and whatnot. However, I want to make a pitch for still having the ability to preserve direct grants. A lot of people are trying, as Supervisor McGordy indicated, to stay in business, and they've appropriated their funds in, already they've paid their taxes, already they've paid their application fee or their renewal fee, their state license fee, and they were really looking for these direct grants for the promises that were made for what they could be used for, which is for any kind of legitimate business purpose. So I think that to the extent, without creating additional administrative burdens, that we can say, even if we're setting aside, let's say, the typical approximately 1/3 for fee waivers for everybody, that within whatever dollar amount each person who has been in the direct grant queue is eligible for. And historically, it's been $50,000, so that's another question and decision point, is do we keep it at $50,000 and serve fewer people, or do we look at changing the dollar amount because there are less funds? And so that's another decision point in terms of the money that was initially thought of as direct grant. But if we can open that up also and give people a choice to make the best decision for their circumstance, that would be really excellent, as long as it doesn't add to the burden of the administration of the grant. If we are switching to all fee waivers, if somehow or another that's the consensus, then I would say that we need to look at whether the overall administration grants that the county receives should be lowered and more of that funds bumped in to the pool for fee waivers, because A, the county's getting that money back again in the fee waiver money, but B, because it really does take a lot less to process that. And I think that there might be a way that GoBiz would be fine with people choosing to spend their direct grant on those fees. So even if it's not called fee relief in the one context, pursuant to the breakdown of the grant contract with the state, I think that there's a way to justify that. But I do think that it's kind of important to preliminarily discuss whether or not there's a different dollar amount per person, and whether or not that dollar amount per person is inclusive of fee waivers that are open to everybody, or just their situation in here.
So kind of building on that theme, should there be a criteria for, there's a couple ways that we could possibly do this. One of them would be criteria based on need, kind of looking at people's business records and where they stand today in terms of their cash flow and status, and have a priority for people, or do you just
It was a
don't-
first come, first serve application process, so I don't think that that would be a legitimate way.
No, I'm thinking more for the fee waiver, not so much for the direct grants. And then the second question is, again, with the capital rationing principle, is that you could lower the amount that's given to individuals, but spread it over a broader number, which is another way of kind of subsidizing or helping people, and it could be somewhat proportional to need.
And the problem when you're getting into need, I'm sorry.
John, your mic's not on.
What?
I wasn't hearing you on your mic.
Oh. With the fee waiver, what is it $10,000, or what's the average?
So with fee relief, it's by fee request. So applicants can request up to $10,000, which could be a combination of multiple fee relief. I think, last time we processed these last June, it was kind of a mixed bag. The biggest fee that was requested to be relief was the annual true-up, which, depending upon the type of license, can range. Right now, I think the average is $2,500.
Okay. So there is there already is an option as to how much money an individual applicant can receive, and it's kind of a menu where they put their money?
If I may, through the chair.
Sure.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank
Basically,
you.
it's what they apply for, and it can be less than that $10,000. So we may have applicants that, are only requesting to waive that annual true-up because that's the only fee that they're facing currently. There may be the 180 of that, where there's applicants that have way more than $10,000 in fee currently due to the county, and they're not going to be able to fulfill them all.
Yeah, because at 10,000, we're talking 130, if my math is correct.
That'd be correct.
Okay, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. And I just want to say on this fee waiver thing, first, with respect to looking at the need, I think that would add an administrative burden that it goes way beyond the amount probably allocated. Typically and historically, this has been on a first come, first serve. The window opens, people apply, that's that, as long as you've been equity verified. So there's not been have you received it before? Just as long as you are spending it on the correct categories, meaning fee relief is specific to county fees, whether it's taxes or building permit fees. And by the way, that's another thing that I think has shifted, is I think a lot of people have gotten through their building permit fees. There may be some out there, but that I think was one of the categories that had increased the amount of fee waivers per person besides the true-up, which was the other largest thing. I think that we're through a lot of people getting building permits. There's some still here and there, so that might reduce the individual's needs to really focus on their annual permit fee as well as the taxes really are the big thing. But I think that getting into looking at the need of the business, You know, I could just say the cannabis industry is hurting. Every cannabis business is in need. And to do a time relative need study at this juncture, I think would delay the process and add unnecessary administrative burden. I think that a first come, first serve, first in line issue would be good. The real question is these people have been waiting for 2 years, did everything right, applied for a direct grant. Should they be lowered in the amount per person so that more of them can be served? Should the available pool of money that they've been waiting for, and it's only because, and forgive me, but the county's incompetence in the past, that those people were waiting in line for 2 years. It's not their fault.
Okay.
So
Let's
at any
move.
rate, I think that those are some of the issues. Should I go on to the other topics for?
Yeah.
Okay. I am curious why there is already allocated 118 fee waivers from the last time. How could those be allocated, but the people who are waiting in queue not have been allocated? So that's a little confusing to me.
And that goes back to when there was over allocation and we didn't have the funds to complete that. And so it was $118,000. And that's what we were committed to making whole those applicants.
Got it. And, okay, so getting back to this whole issue of catching up. Now I'm out of LEAP program. And I just want to say, as in every area of the grant administration, I see this particular team working incredibly hard to be as practical and efficient as possible, and weighing out the consideration of what the history has been in reaching out to people and trying to get missing documentation or whatever, and they've just been excellent. So I just really want to have that as a blanket statement. This team has been extraordinary in balancing very challenging situations that they've inherited, and they've done a stellar job. And that's across the board under not just the grant programs, but everything. So my pointed questions are not intended to in any way mar that opinion. With respect to overall costs and the deficit of the department and fees for the services, I think that I look forward to the next round of really looking at those studies and working on some ideas that had been presented in January to see whether or not there's a way to balance the appropriate fees with the county having cost recovery. But I do want to reframe once again, and not to harp on the horrible past that most of us have lived through for now, 8 years, but this catch-up was really the fault of the county, not the fault of this department, not the fault of the applicants. It was the fault of the county for a series of decisions it made, not just in hiring, but also in policy decisions that created fits and starts. For example, at one point, fighting about whether or not the county was going to do CEQA or not. Another thing was stopping CDFW from doing the sensitive species review, just halting it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we just want to put that context. We're coming out of that darkness and into the light, but it's really important that it has nothing to do with the actors right now, including the applicants and the current licensees. Okay. But I do look forward to delving into that a little bit more. With respect to
Hannah, you've had a podium for 15 minutes.
Well, actually, I was interrupted, but yes,
Yeah,
I'm going to try and hit up the last few things.
If you could.
Yes,
quickly.
I will. When there's not been a meeting for a couple of months and there's many things on the issue, it's, please have some tolerance. I will move along. The EIR is dropping soon. I wish we knew exactly what that meant. And I do want to say for the public that part of the EIR process is public hearings, comment period, a 75-day comment period. So there will be an opportunity for input. I certainly encourage the contractor Ascent to consider holding public meetings, because I think that there's a lot of confusion, a lot of information that would benefit from those kind of public meetings. So if they're listening, that would be wonderful. With respect to CDFW and the SSHR process, again, thank you Supervisor Hashtag and to staff for trying to move that along. We're looking forward to our last round of mine and Chantel's comments regarding the Exhibit A tool to move further along with CDFW and come back for further refinement, as well as working internally with the department on the comments we made on the internal review policy. It will be important for us to look ahead, as Ms. McBurney outlined a little while ago with the Gantt chart, of what is going to happen if there are still people stuck in the SSHQ as we're entering towards the latter part of the year. So that's something that I encourage us to keep on top of. With respect to the reporting that's done, I really feel strongly that this MCD team has been doing a fantastic job. And I would suggest, without adding administrative burden to them, that they add a few things to their reports if it's not too burdensome. One is they process a lot of modifications every time somebody has to change their layout or whatever. And Supervisor McGordy, you know, as farmers, often that is necessary. People have to file modification. They pay a modification fee, but that's processed. They also are doing reassignments from one business to another, an individual to a business or whatever. And the department is processing a lot of those, and I think that they should receive credit for those, that work product that they are doing on their report. So if it's not too burdensome, to add that to the report. And then additionally, it would really be helpful to show the year to date in addition to the last month, as well as each year. And I recognize that many years prior reporting is not necessarily as accurate as we would hope, but I think the comparison to see what was moved along in a 4-year period versus this past year would be helpful, and I appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Mr. Amato.
Can it hear me? Hi, my name is Stephen Amato. I'm president of the MCA. I mean, I would like to propose for an adjustable microphone if that's possible at some point in the future. I'm Italian. I like to speak with my hands, but anywho, I like to speak, just get brass tacks here about the LEAP program. It's unfortunate to hear this news. I know there's a lot of people that are very disappointed that are listening in, and a lot of the farmers and cultivators that I know have been planning for these funds to get into compliance, to finish their compliance plans, whether it's, you know, doing some work on a greenhouse or whatever it is. So as leader and part of the leadership of the MCA, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm speaking on behalf of what the whole community's wishes are without presenting it to our membership at a very minimum. And I see that there's a time constraint, that if we're looking to use these fees for the May true-up that's due at the end of the month of May, perhaps a couple of quick options that I'm thinking that the county may be able to help with is giving an additional 30 days on that. Maybe make that due end of June so we could come to a real decision and go through a little bit of a process and get some real feedback from the community. Provide some options in a survey or something that we can present to our membership so that they can vote and we can get an actual feedback from our community, see what where their interests are and what they feel is fair. So it's not just on, you know, the decision to be made on poor Sarah McBurney here, what she's going to do with these funds, so she starts getting the Maloika. And on top of that, I think, you know, these people that have been in the queue for this whole time, I mean, multiple years, waiting to do some of the, you know, they're on shoestring budgets here. You know, maybe giving them an extension for another year or so to get into compliance, rather than just the 12 months that they were given from when they were issued a CCBL. I mean, I don't think, I mean, if it's gone on this long, I mean, another year or so to help them out, you know, to understand that they could, you know, spread out those costs or plan a little bit better, because not only were they just expecting these and they went through all the work and hassle of getting these in, there was kind of promises made that they were going to be getting these funds. I mean, those expectations were set to some of these people. I mean, I know personally myself that was told to me. As a cultivator, that's part of that program. So those are just a couple of ideas I think that, you know, should be possibly explored to just, you know, help us get along this process rather than, you know, forcing some sort of decision to be made here today, obviously, and then, you know, implementing it just because of, you know, there's a deadline coming on May 31st. I mean, this county has been able to make exceptions in the past for things like this. I think it's more than reasonable considering this is a, you know, a major issue here. I mean, there's a lot of funds we're talking about, and there's a lot of people that this can affect. The county has a major investment in these licenses and the work that's come. I'd hate to see people have to be bounced out of the program because of this decision being made in a rash and an unfortunate situation. Thank you all very much, and thank you for all your hard work, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, Supervisor.
Yeah, Steve, I have a question for you real quick. So as we're thinking about this, where do you see the more desperate need? Is it fee waiver or is it direct assistance?
I mean, you can hear, so, I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing of that. There was that many people in the queue. I mean, so obviously they applied for these funds, and in that queue, I mean, they put together budgets for all the different needs that they have. I would imagine that for those individuals, that's a very desperate need to them as an individual, and the fees, you know, yeah, would help out a lot more people, but it, you know, not having that direct grant granted to them could be majorly impactful to that individual person. So it's almost a no-win situation. I mean, it's hard for me to just answer that off the top of my head. I just know that there's a lot of people really anticipating and excited about, you know, this funding coming through. And they were anxious when when we were applying for this grant in December that we weren't sure we were even going to get it received. You know, look, it's an unfortunate circumstance from the previous regime to what's going on now. It's beautiful the way things are going now, but that's why I'd like to get some feedback from the community, see how they feel before we just, you know, make this decision right now. I mean, if a lot of people in their hearts feel, you know, it would be great to spread it out and share these funds collectively throughout the community, great. But there's going to probably some that are going to be like, hey, I've been sitting for 2 years waiting this. This is going to put me out of business. I understand that. Sorry, I can't really directly answer that.
Well, I'm thinking of, again, as from the perspective of the health of the industry, got limited funds. What do we do to keep the industry as healthy as possible? And if you want to go back to the community, ask that question just like that, is that if we have a limited amount of money, what's the best way to use it?
Yeah, I mean, that for sure. Like I said, I mean, possibly maybe we could come up with a few options. I mean, some of the stuff that Hannah was speaking about, there were some pretty interesting ways of going about it, a little bit of a mixed bag of this and that. You know, some that might be able to save funds for the administration so that there's more funds available for more fee waivers and such. That way it's impacting more people. But like I said, I mean, there's going to be some winners and there's going to be a lot of losers in this.
Well, it's unfortunate that, you know, the expectations were set higher than the reality of what we got. And so, you know, when I look at the numbers, it's like, if we did the 50,000 direct grants, we'd have 26 out of 276, less than 10%. And if we did the fee waivers, maybe 130, maybe more, at 10,000, right?
Right.
That's less than 50% of all the people who applied for direct grants.
Right. I mean, I think the negligible thing that was done here is that they just kept the window open and kept accepting applicants without letting them know, like, hey, there's a limit. You know, it should have been done in a little bit more responsible fashion.
Let's see.
And it's not their fault. just
the idea of an extension for the fee waivers. Is it for the true ups and such? Is it possible? Do you know if that's a possibility?
I'm unable to speak to that. I would have to check with the treasurer tax collector because ultimately it is a deadline set forth by them. It's definitely a question we can pose to them and seek feedback on. One thing that prompted thought in my mind through MCA was I think it may be appropriate, and we probably have the timing for it, where we can open up a section on our website where it's literally just a 2-question piece, and it's a voting poll, and it's just, do you want to see the money go towards fee relief? Do you want to see the money go towards direct grants? I would like to add the caveat that since I have been here, we haven't accepted, so about a year, we haven't accepted any new direct grant applications. And there will probably be some confusion for folks on, am I even in the queue? The queue is not something that we have public at all. There's really not a way for applicants to know where they sit in the queue in terms of equity. I'm not comfortable sharing that information, and I don't think it's appropriate, especially given that this is to help folks who were impacted personally by the war on drugs. So it's a tough spot to be in, and I think that's a tough question for even our applicants to answer because they don't know all of the answers, right? Because if I know I'm number 1 in that direct grant queue, guess what I'm voting for? So I think that it's important to note that as a caveat as well. So I think our applicants are going to go into this blind, but I do think it may be appropriate to host some sort of poll. It's going to be open for a very short window of time, but just to have people go on and click what they think is appropriate. And we may even add a third option of both direct grants and fee waivers.
Well, I think also you could ask if they wanted to go for the direct grants, should the grant, the 50,000 be lowered?
Right. I mean, and while we're talking about these topics, like I brought up before, I mean, for people who were anticipating direct grants and those who get it, and they're great for them, but those who don't get it or just become straight fee waiver, could there be a consideration for those that have compliance plans getting more time? I mean, I know that's probably where they're going to be looking to put those funds, and they're like waiting for the budgeting on that. And like I said, that could be make it or break it for them. At least it gives them another year to decide if they could do it or save money or use this year's cultivation money that they earn to put towards that. I mean, I think that's a fair ask, considering that they've been sitting for someone, like you said, some of these people for over 2 years.
Yeah. Is that something we could consider?
For fee relief, I think it's important to note that most of the deadlines pertain around the TTC annual true-up deadline. In terms of MCD fees or planning and building fees, I don't think there's as hard of a cutoff need for that fee relief decision. So yes, there is ability to extend certain fees and possibly the TTCs depending upon what they say. I do want to note as well that in terms of administrative workload, I don't necessarily think that fee relief is quicker for the department. A singular transaction is quicker, but when you multiply that by much more, I mean, if we processed this all with direct grants and we helped 29 applicants, that would be pretty quick in terms of administrative task. But, you know, when we're processing 144 fee relief versus 29 direct grants, it's kind of neck and neck in terms of workload.
Yeah, but the idea with the compliance plan, is it possible to, you know, those 276 to look at who has compliance plans that they were trying to deal with, maybe give them an extension?
I would have to look into our code and see what's allowable in terms of extending on the compliance plans. I don't want to say yes, but I don't want to say no. So I would have to look into it.
Yeah, okay.
I like your idea of having a survey online for people to respond to.
And maybe, Stephen, you could direct people to this survey.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to do it myself. If they're willing to do it, good.
Yeah.
It's easier to send an email.
We would also be able to platform that via Cananote as well with the direct link and share that directly with anyone that's interested as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for considering these considerations.
Yeah, thank you for those ideas. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy April, everybody. Chantal Simon Pietri with Mainspring Consulting. I have just a few comments. I might not use all my minutes. Great. On the discussion of the LEAP fee versus direct, as listening through Sarah's presentation and the board's questions back and forth, and then Hannah's comments and Steve's comments, I recommend that any way that this somewhat significant decision can be put back to the community that are most affected by it, be done in an effective way. So whether it's done through a survey, through Canon Notes notification, through the MCD website, with MCA support, that it just, assuming that we know what is best for the cultivator is not a good position to be in when we're talking about giving them funds to support them with economic survival. Let's ask them what they think is best and how they would like it to be done. And there's no all-in-one versus 50-50, like straight percentages. I wouldn't recommend that also, but let's get the feedback back and go forward with that. I've said this a lot in the past, but bringing it back to like a collaborative decision type of way. Ask those that are most impacted before you come up with any ideas about what you think would work best in their minds for them. I also just, a little side note on what's been mentioned a couple times is that there were multiple people, and I don't know the numbers, but who were promised LEAP funds. I'd like to know more about that. What form of promise was made? Was it written documentation from the county? How many? And what obligation does the county have to follow through on that if some sort of commitment was made that application would be funded? I'm not suggesting the county have to follow through with that, but let's not give it more merit than it needs. I think there's a lot of hope and well-developed applications that were then massaged many times to get them to meet the quality of what the LEAP and Elevate Impact standards were at the time. And again, as Stephen mentioned, the application period remained open when it should have been shut potentially 12 or 18 months prior. And so coming back to just let's ask those who might now be affected by this, what do we do with this remaining bit of money? There may not be any more. You've been waiting this long. There's many points of view to consider, so let's bring in those that are most impacted by it. Switching to LGAGP, just want to say thank you, Sarah. It's been really great. We worked for many months in close meetings, and so just a moment of gratitude for everybody that was involved to develop the manual, put the notifications out, get people's applications together, submit them, and then now I'm receiving really prompt communication from the county, including DocuSign contracts for clients to sign in order to know that there's a check in the mail. And like when we're all still like, let's just hold our breath because, you know, people heard there were checks in the mail in the past about other things. And so let's just say the checks are coming, like the quantity of different variety of celebrations we're going to have like the water tank party, and we're going to have like the new irrigation party, whatever it is they're going to fund, or the pay off your debts for whatever debts you've accrued via that money. My last one is a question, and Sarah, I'm happy to take this one offline with you by email if you want, but if you want to give the answer to the group, you can. Of course, totally up to you. On the tiering designation under the renewals category in the report, I'm still so curious about like what did anybody doing their Appendix G get them after people were told they had to, they would get it paid for, they needed to pay for it themselves, they had to hire a consultant, the consultant had to be on this list. People went and paid a lot of money, including to me, to have me do these things for these people. We turned them into the county. Still not getting clear answers. One from the DCC, from some folks who are getting documentation saying that a scientific amendment, including their Appendix G, allowed them to transition from provisional to annual. And no matter how many people we ask through all the different email avenues we have, nobody's saying what happened between the county, between Ascent or Four Leaf, depending upon, I think it's with Ascent, and with the DCC is like, did it get anybody anywhere or not? But I see that it's mentioned in the valuation of their tier designation. I'd like to better understand that. I'll take my answer sitting down. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, through the chair?
Sure.
Okay, so in terms of Appendix G, I can't really speak to, in terms of the EIR or transitioning to annual, what the Appendix G got to them. What I can say is the county was able to share, at this point, we've now shared Appendix G materials with both Ascent and the DCC. So we've shared with both agencies any Appendix G materials we received. Whether or not those were signed and certified off by the county or not, any Appendix G materials that we did receive were passed forward through in hopes that they would aid and transition folks from their provisional to annual or annual licensure at the state level. As we're not the lead agency, I can't speak to what those materials exactly did, although I wish I could. What I can tell you, when it came down to tiering, there was a significant departmental conversation about how we want to manage the tiering of the workload and the smoothing of the workload. And I think I highlighted on this the last GGC, but just to reiterate, the department took every single one of these tiers to heart, and they really tried to give the folks that had paid for their Appendix G and had put in the work to get their Appendix G and really done everything right to that Tier 5. So what that means is an applicant is going to do their renewal application. They're going to renew in 2024. They will not pay a renewal fee for the next five years until 2029 to the department. So although that's probably not as significant of a cost savings to them as they spent on the Appendix G, it was something to where, hey, the department really looked at it and said, specifically our planners, like, these are folks that have done everything right. They've jumped through every hurdle we've asked them to jump through. They've done everything early. They've gotten in materials early to us. Like, what small benefit can we get to them just to kind of reward and congratulate them on being those folks who are the applicants that do everything right for us. So the department really put a lot of thought process into the tiering. And again, there are folks that may have qualified for more than one tier, so we always tried to benefit the applicant and bump them up tiers if possible. But just to smooth that workload, there was some decisions made there. Ultimately, everyone will be on that 5-year renewal track, so it's not, in the future, everyone will get to where they're just renewing every 5 years, but this was just a small gratitude that the department wanted to pay those folks.
Very good. Supervisor McGordy.
I just also wanted to recognize John Burks as being really critical to sort of the maturing of this department and having things like procedure manuals and a really organized process. And that was time and money well spent by the county to get John involved to try to help this department function well. Thank you, John.
Certainly. Take a bow. Okay. Any further public comment? And this is about items 2A and 2B.
Good morning, Corinne Powell, local cultivator, advocate for all licensees, I hope. I appreciate the information that came in addition to the monthly report. Did I miss something? Was that published elsewhere? Or is that just an update in today's meeting? Of the breakdown of how many people were in which queue and how much would go to whom and all that sort of thing. Did I miss that, or was that just presented now?
You're talking about the LEAP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah.
That was just a verbal presentation. I will incorporate, specifically with LJAGP, I'll incorporate those numbers on reports moving forward. LEAP, we'll see how it dials out, and then if we proceed with direct grants, we'll include number of direct grants or fee relief processed by the department as well.
Okay, it was valuable. I just couldn't quite keep up with your verbal presentation. I support the comments and the ideas that have been presented by other speakers. Regarding LEAP funds, I'm a little uncomfortable with the first come, first serve criteria, only because there were county errors which prevented people from participating in the past. And this is the first go around where they may be included. So how could they be in line, kind of thing? I'm a little uncomfortable with that criteria. I am looking for the option, as we've all, I think, kind of agreed, that a survey to MCA membership is in order. We cannot speak for the hundreds of folks who are participating in the trade association. Just off the top of my head, without other categories of choice that might be presented in some definitive way, I think addressing more people with fewer dollars is the correct way to go. I think having 29 people receive a $50,000 grant and may have been recipients of previous equity rounds is inappropriate, given the number of people who are either long-term participants but not included in equity eligibility, or just in general. It seems inappropriate. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tamara from That Good Farm up above Anderson Valley. I'd like to talk, I know you've seen me here before, I'd like to talk about the LEAP, and from my point of view, I like some of the ideas that Steve came up with to extend timelines and everything. What I'd like to talk about today is humiliation. I'd like to talk about the way that the war on drugs personally affected me, the way the county of Mendocino humiliated me, had me arrested. I was arrested, made to strip naked, cough, spend the next 2 years of my life defending my freedom. The county of Mendocino took my farm equipment. I had to buy it back. They came to my property, destroyed my irrigation lines, and that's the sort of thing that my understanding from reading on the county's website for LEAP and the GoBiz definition of these funds, it was to right the wrongs and the injustices done by the war on drugs. And while some of my friends who lived in neighborhoods that were affected, I can't speak to the amount of trauma that they've experienced, and you can't really quantify that. But I would urge yet another criteria to look at the truly affected people who have actually been arrested, people who had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of their lives living out of their cars, fearing that the next warrant was coming for them. This is the sort of life that we had to lead while Mendocino County took money from the DEA to fly us and hunt us with Black Hawk helicopters. I know it sounds sensational. It's not. That's exactly what used to happen here. So I love all my other farmers. I know it's a really bad situation to be in. You want to keep the economy going. You want to keep these people. Everybody's in a really bad situation. We need these funds to stay in business. I know people are going back to the black market. I know people are completely moving out of Mendocino. I know we're in a bad situation. But from my point of view, as someone who is deeply affected and directly affected by the war on drugs, I would urge you to consider the situations that people were in, the criteria of true affectedness. On another note, I really appreciate all the efficiencies that are coming, and I would like to urge even more efficiencies, and I can't come here without saying, you know what would be even more efficient? If we just considered cannabis agriculture. And so I love that there's only 5% of this grant being used for administrative. That's amazing, as opposed to like half within years past. I love that we're getting through many more applications. We've got a deficit. I heard you on the phone, I was dialed in. There's a concern about being cost zero, recuperating costs. Reduce the bureaucracy, make it as easy as growing tomatoes. I know that's a big ask, and I know there's a lot of details, and I'm not even going to talk about the details. That's up to you guys to figure out.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tamara. Right. Any other public comments on 2A, 2B? Well, can we just go, let's make sure everyone, what? We have 3 people online. Let's make sure everyone gets a chance. We still have a lot of work to be done still.
Hello, my name is Syracuse Golden Ghost. This is my first time speaking here in quite some time, and I am not an equity applicant. However, I do have some ideas that I think might be useful as you guys are puzzling out what to do with limited funds. You have more applicants than you can obviously serve with the funds available at the levels that are being offered. In order to go back through the process and determine who may be eligible and who may not, this could take some time parsing out the different discrepancies between one applicant and the next. By that time, a lot of deadlines may have passed, and the financial difficulties for those who are in the application process who otherwise might have got through it and received their funding already may have been exacerbated by that timeline. My suggestion, and this is just spitballing here, is you could divide the funds according to the number of applicants and set that as a baseline, where you say, okay, X amount of funds divided by X number of applicants. If this was our baseline award for each applicant as they come through and are approved, with the caveat that a second round of funding could be given to the applicants who were approved. When you find that the numbers are actually smaller in the end, you're not going to have every single one of these applicants approved. So there would be a pool of funds left over, which then could be distributed again. This is simply a thought to make things a little more expedient and alleviate some of the pressure that people are feeling right away. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to online? Okay, Monique Ramirez.
Good morning, you guys. Thank you. This is Monique Ramirez from District 3. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I just want to share my thoughts for the LEAP grant. And I really appreciate all of the comments from the speakers that have already come up. I really liked the idea of potentially offering the applicant to be able to decide if they want to spend the money on their direct grant or technical assistance. I think that came from Hannah. That was a great suggestion. I also liked what Steve said about extending the true-up deadline in case people want to do it for fee waivers and we can't come to a conclusion on that in enough time. And I love the idea of putting it to the community to decide what they think is best, and that the county host a survey online on the county website. And obviously our trade organization can help advertise that and get the word out to the people so we can get a good number of participants to give the feedback. I think that's a really great suggestion, and I love that that shows how we're being collaborative and working together in community spirit. I really love the change in energy overall of our county and how things are shifting. I also do want to highlight, though, that in the beginning of the presentation from staff, I think there was a discussion about the total amount of grant money, and then some of it is reserved for the administration of it, and then it said they said technical assistance. But I have been in the queue for technical assistance for years, and it's never happened. And I thought that it never was going to. And so I hope that that funding is being pulled out and put it back into the fee waiver or the direct grant amount. Because again, I've been waiting since like day one for the technical assistance. I filled out that form and nothing ever came of it for years. I also want to say, what happens for people that were originally approved and started spending down their fee waiver allocation, but then the thing got halted, obviously, because the money dried up? Are those people now not eligible to spend any more towards their fee waivers? I feel like that discussion was slightly touched on between Hannah and staff, but I just want to make sure I understand where that was headed. And then when we look at fee waivers, like the most that people are using it for is to probably pay their true ups and then potentially their permit fees, and then maybe building permits. But like it was suggested earlier, a lot of the people have moved through their building permits at this point. We've pretty much built out most of our infrastructure. I mean, of course, that doesn't apply to phase 3 people necessarily, but for all the legacy people, we're pretty much done through that. And I question like the fee waiver allocation. I almost feel like people, I think John, Supervisor Hashek, you asked Steve Amato, you know, what you thought was the most need for applicants. And I personally, as an applicant and going through this process, I would definitely say direct grants is probably where people need the funding the most, because the taxes are a reflection of how much your sales were for the year. And we have these minimums. They've also been reduced by half from the county. So there's kind of already been a little bit of a, you know, a little olive branch that's been extended. So I think that that pressure is kind of taken off a little bit. At least it has been for me as a cottage operator. I certainly did not even meet the minimum sales tax requirement from the original amount and barely made it for the half, but it's still helpful. So I think that we should probably put our focus more to the direct grants. But again, putting out a survey to see what the people come up with, I think is a great suggestion, and you'll probably get a lot more information from that. And just make sure it's noticed and get everyone aware of it is going to be the key to having that be a successful place to get information. And I just appreciate everybody, and I do hope that we can try to find a way to help everybody as much as possible, and that even if in the future the county does have to match funds, that we will try our best to do that, because we can see that investing in this industry is important and it keeps our economy going. And I also really want to say quickly that I appreciated Tamara and her comment about really looking at the the impacts of these, the war on drugs that, was affected for these applicants, and making sure that these people really had that impact. I think that's something I've always said as well from the very beginning. And I know the criteria have changed and there's been impacts across the board, but the people that really went to jail and stuff like that, like maybe they should be receiving a higher priority, and tier it that way. I don't know if it even could happen at this point, especially with administrative hours would have to be spent to figure all that out. But I think that's something that we kind of were blind. That thing got missed, I think, along the way. And I really wish we had kind of investigated that a little bit more in the beginning, because I think we would have come to a different place where we're sitting now. Anyways, thank you again for all your time. I appreciate you all. Sorry for going over the time.
Thank you. Right. Okay, we're going to try to keep it to the 3 minutes from now on. I think we really need to keep this meeting moving. So, okay, Paul Hansberry.
Good morning. This is Paul Hansberry. Most of the things that I wanted to comment on have already been spoken to. I really like the idea that Hannah brought up about being able to modify your direct grant budget to include fee waivers. That is, after all, an ongoing expense and should be qualified. So that's a very good idea. And I think it's another option, being able to modify your direct grant budgets easily as long as it's a qualifying item. So incentivizing adoption has always been our battle cry. And so as far as compliance, having an extension as it relates to the LEAP program, people have been waiting for this to get to their compliance. So is there perhaps instituting a mechanism for applying for an extension for your compliance plan due to financial hardship, or because of you haven't gotten the funds to do that? So extending the compliance issue would be a valuable tool, I think, for the MCD, as well as extending with the tax. I'm glad that they're looking into extending that because of the deadline and the conflict with the LEAP funding. I think I'll just leave it at that, but thanks very much for all your hard work, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Phone number 8120.
Phone number ending in 8120, you're going to want to press *9 to unmute. I'm sorry, *6.
Hello, good morning. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is Susan Tibbin, lovingly and legally. Thank you very much, Tamara, for what you brought up. The actual language that we read really emphasizes the incredible generational trauma that many, many of us have experienced, and now those stories just sound like something out of some apocryphal story or something, but they really happened with the helicopters, etc. So thank you for taking into account those heritage people who have experienced that. As we continue to organize the Meet the Farmer events, we're encountering some interesting changes, or actually pretty worrisome changes. Many of the farmers who fallowed did so out of financial necessity. They're just hanging on by their fingernails, and their fingernails are bleeding. We're also seeing in urban markets an absolute race to the bottom. So it's becoming more and more difficult for many of us to stay in the market. And finally, the evidence, thoughtfulness, and consideration and care on the part of the staff and the board is truly appreciated. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to comment.
Hello? Okay. So we're to wrap it up, especially the concern with how to deal with the LEAP funds. We're going to do a survey. And with the results of that survey, do you feel like you can make the decision?
I do believe with the results of that survey, I will feel more comfortable making a decision. Again, you know, I think that there's ultimately going to be some strong wins and a lot of disappointment, but this will allow a more educated decision by the department.
Okay, do you feel, Supervisor McGordy, do you feel all right with giving staff the ability to make that decision?
I do. I just, just as a matter of course with our legal counsel here, is this something that is okay to handle at departmental level, or does this have to go through the Board of Supervisors for final blessing?
James Ross, interim county counsel through the chair, if I may. That is a question that I have, and I'm not in a position to be able to answer that question right now. I'm not sure what delegations of authority have previously been approved.
So I kind of feel like we can probably, as a maybe consent calendar item, when we know what we want to do, put it on saying this is what general government recommends based on what we find from the survey and internal discussion in the department. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, the timelines are certainly concerns, so I don't know if, it seems like we have this money budgeted for direct grants or fee waivers, and that it's really should be up to the department to make that decision. But
I'm not saying I disagree. I'm saying I don't have the information at this time to be able to answer the question. So one option could be, I mean, if the authority has been delegated to the department, then certainly the department can exercise that authority.
And if it's not, the decision is that the department doesn't have that authority, then they can bring it back and we can go through the consent calendar or make it the.
Yeah, that's what I think, because I don't think that any of the individual board members are going to want to take this on as a new discussion. I think that they trust
Right, and I think
group.
that money's out there, it just needs to be dispersed in the most efficient way possible and according to what the outcome is. So we're all right with that decision then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you'll also explore like the extension of the fee waivers and the extension of the compliance grants and see what options are there.
Yes, I will definitely check with the TTC on an extension for the annual true-up. And then I did receive confirmation that the department can extend compliance plans. So this was written into our most recent streamlined ordinance. It's a case-by-case basis. So that's something that we would be able to take in consideration at the department level. So 1 out of 2 answered.
Okay, very good. Then we're good with this, 2A and 2B?
Yeah, I did want to add another caveat that for direct technical assistance, we are hosting a workshop on May 10th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. with our direct technical assistance vendor that we've procured through an RFP process. So they are an approved vendor, and the hope is it's a meet and greet for the public. So it's not an official direct technical assistance meeting. It's just for folks to be able to log on to Zoom, get to know that vendor, and be more confident in the decision and the rollout of direct technical assistance with the department. So more details will be announced via Canada.
And when is that?
May 10th from 10 to 11:30 a.m.
Okay, and that will kind of addresses some of the questions that Ms. Ramirez had.
That is correct.
Okay. Ms. Powell, if it's quick, I'll take it.
But Corinne Powell, is it possible in the monthly reports to break out under what I think is your topic of initial licenses issued, what is a new CCBL for phase 3 applicants and what is just final processing and license issuance for phase 1 and phase 2? Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, do we need a motion or anything to accept those 2A and 2B?
Okay. I make a motion that we accept 2A and 2B reports, and we've given staff direction.
Okay, second.
Supervisor McCordy?
Yes.
Supervisor Hushek?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, it's, we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. Do we need to take a 5-minute break? Okay, 5-minute break.
I realized that my life was going to change dramatically in ways that I did not know or understand or even comprehend. I was going to have to really go to the well and become accountable and adjust to a lot of things differently.
Que queríamos era que naciera, ya, sí, ya quiero tener, entonces ahorita lo que tenemos es aprovecharla, quererla y cuidarla lo más que se pueda.
Creo que a todos nos preocupa la primera vez que nos dicen que vamos a ser padres.
When we started the program, my daughter was about 3 months, and my daughter's 22 months now. Something I love about my child, that she's healthy, she's happy, she knows that she's cared for and loved. Those are some of the things that I wanted to make sure that she had, and she has them.
I'm happy today with my daughter. She's the greatest thing in my life, and I'm glad to wake up and see her, and everything I do it for her.
Sí, bueno, yo también vengo de una familia separada. Creo que por eso también me motiva a estar más presente con él, de quizás también estar de la forma quizás que yo no la tuve para Máximo. Y también comprender que el padre no solo es el que pone los límites y las reglas, sino que también está ahí para hablar, acompañar, regalonear, jugar, cosas lindas también, no solo ser el guía para el niño, sino que también un compañero de vida.
I was more of a elated and thankful because for 3 months I was in baby land, and when you're in baby world, you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants and hoping you know that you're just supportive in the ways that you can be supportive.
Pero pues aquí pues ya los enseñan un poquito más cosas que uno no sabía, cómo cuidarla, cómo desarrollarla, cómo educarla, y pues es algo bien porque pues cosas que yo no sabía, pues ya usted nos las dijo y todo como consejos, y pues muchas cosas que se aprendieron.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia, sino más bien un programa de estado programado para la ayuda solamente. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros, porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades. Siempre nos hemos podido apoyar en Gaby a través de su programa. Encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
You know, my experience has been nothing but positive. Annette has been wonderful. She's on time. She lets me know if there's going to be any changes in the schedule.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I still feel the challenge of being a parent now in today's world is immense. I think that you need support.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa, que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Don't be afraid to take that step. Like, don't be afraid to get help, because, you know, you might think that you know what you're doing, but it's always okay to have extra support, and don't do it alone.
Give it a try. You got nothing to lose. It's free. I'm grateful that I took advantage, because it's something that has put me in touch with my child or closer to my child and her development.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
Personally, I think everybody could benefit from the home visiting programs.
I think that as a parent now, I'm grateful for support more than I was before.
I filled out that form not knowing what I was doing. I am very, very grateful that I did it because it's really helping me a lot.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades.
Well, I was a new mom and I had no experience taking care of a newborn.
There isn't like a book on how to raise a kid.
We come from like a lot of family history of,
Go to item
drugs, violence.
2C, which is discussion and possible action, including acceptance, informational presentation on a Mendocino Cannabis Department procedure interpreting and implementing the cannabis cultivation business license density limitations found within Mendocino County Code 10A17.070. All right, and I'm going to look to the Cannabis Department staff and to County Counsel's office.
Good morning, supervisors, interim county counsel Ross, deputy CEO Ms. Johnson. My name is Jared Schwass, deputy county counsel. here to present a updated procedure developed by the Cannabis Department. This occurred during conversation with a community member and staff. A question was posed regarding the genesis of the 10,000 square foot cultivation limit and how the limits found in 10A17.070 apply to non-nursery CBLs. Here are my And so, as drafted, the 10,000 square foot limit found in 10A17.070D applies to parcels that have a nursery CCBL and a non-nursery CCBL on one parcel. However, there is no such limit applied to parcels that have two non-nursery CCBLs on the parcel. Rather, the language provides that a parcel can stack two separate non-nursery CCBLs so long as it does not exceed the maximum square footage found in the county's zoning code. And so then we look at the zoning codes that permit cannabis CCBLs on specific zoning districts, and we find that there are no limits per parcel applied in the zoning code. Rather, the zoning code applies square foot limits per CCBL. So taking those two, taking the zoning code and the limit provided within 10A17.070D, find that the square foot limit provided in the code is based on the CCBL types that are allowed in the zoning district rather than a per parcel square foot limit. For example, individual in the ag zoning district can obtain a 2 large outdoor CCBL and a 2B large mixed light CCBL that would have a max of 20,000 square feet cultivation limit. So based on this updated procedure, people can obtain 2 separate non-nursery CCBLs on a parcel so long as the type of CCBLs are allowed in their particular zoning district and all other requirements of the Mendocino Cannabis Ordinance are satisfied. And moving forward, we understand that it may not be possible for individuals to apply for new licenses within their parcel. However, if they do have a nursery CCBL and a non-nursery CCBL, they will be allowed to modify that nursery CCBL into a non-nursery CCBL so long as their footprint doesn't expand. So they would have to have the modified non-CCBL, non-nursery CCBL has to be within the same footprint as the nursery operation.
So this would, if a person were applying for the second CCBL, it would all be phase 3.
Correct. If they currently don't have if they just have one non-nursery CCBL on their parcel and want to add a second, it would have to be through the phase 3 application.
And so resource lands would still be limited to just one.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So this is just a understanding of the ordinance as it exists, right? Due to this question that was raised.
Correct. We took a deeper dive into the 10,000 square foot limit that's been applied and reviewing the code sections, looking at prior meetings and directives. We found that the 10,000 square foot limit applied solely to non-nursery CCBL mixed with a nursery CCBL, that individual was limited to 10,000 square feet of mature canopy space if they have those two specific licenses on a parcel. But there's nothing that would prohibit them from obtaining two separate CCBLs that are non-nursery types on the parcel.
And so this is not an expansion, it's just a understanding of the ordinance. And our goal as MCD is to get people to their annual licensure. And so this isn't going to really affect that in any way. The main purpose is to get people to their licensure. And this is just another option for people probably somewhere down the line.
Correct. This isn't expanding the total square footage that is currently allowed. Individuals can have a nursery CCBL, which will allow 22,000 square feet of cultivation space on their property, on the parcel, excuse me. But with the two separate non-nursery CCBLs, the maximum, based on the classifications of the type of licenses, the maximum would still be 20,000 square feet rather than the 22,000 square feet allowed in a nursery CCBL.
Okay.
So this is a presentation solely. We're not seeking approval or referral from the committee. We just, the department believed it was best to inform the committee and inform the public of this updated procedure as well.
Right. And so this is not an ordinance change. We're not going through any of those processes. It's just an understanding or interpretation of what already exists.
Correct.
Supervisor McGordy.
So I'm a little slow on the uptake, so help me understand this a little bit better. What's the maximum area that we can actually cultivate on a parcel?
If I may, through the chair?
Yes.
Forget nurseries just for a second, but just in terms of cannabis canopy.
If I may, through the chair. So, yeah, like my example previously, if you are sitting on, for example, if you're sitting on an ag zoning district, the maximum, so you can get two separate non-nursery CCBLs. You can get two separate CCBL types on that parcel. And if you, so if you go for a nursery under 10A-17-070, you're limited to that 22,000 square feet, and 10,000 square feet is limited to mature cannabis cultivation space. However, if you get two non-nursery licenses, the maximum you'd be able to get a large outdoor, which allows a maximum of 10,000 square feet under that license. Then you could also get a large mixed light license, which allows an additional 10,000 square feet. So you can get 20,000 square feet of total canopy space under those two non-nursery licenses. So, however, if you do a nursery plus a non-nursery, the maximum you'll be able to get is a 22,000 square feet, which 10,000 square feet is limited to the mature canopy space.
Okay, so it wouldn't be additive to where you could have 42,000 square feet, so it's limited.
You are still limited, oh, excuse me, if I may through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
You are still limited to two CCB, as stated in 10A-17, a person may obtain two separate CCBLs of different CCBL types on a single legal parcel.
Okay. So I'm surprised we don't have anybody who has taken advantage of that opportunity so far. Do we have any grows in the county that are mixed light and field grown that make up 20,000 square feet?
If I may through the chair, no.
But that's a possibility.
Correct.
So if somebody really wants to go all out, they can do both mixed light and field grown.
If I may through the chair, yes.
Yeah, and there's none existing because that was not the understanding of the cannabis department before. But this new understanding is that that would be allowable.
Correct. If I may, the language further down in 10A17-070D, where it stipulates that 10,000 square feet may be only no more, which no more than 10,000 square feet may be grown to maturity. There's a potential that that was the genesis of the 10,000 square foot limit, but nowhere in the code limits the cultivation space to 10,000 square feet, other than for each, the maximum under one CCBL is 10,000 square feet.
Okay, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Amato.
Well, hello again, Stephen Amato, president of CA. This is definitely going to be an emotional topic for some people, and I'd like to first point out it's great to see county staff, county council, supervisors who dedicate themselves to this specific topic and take these separate meetings every month, working in conjunction on looking at things like this and revising and digging into the ordinance like it's never been looked at before in the past, and discovering this language and this language interpretation. Now, as the MCA leadership has met and discussed, we agree with this interpretation of this pre-existing language. With that said, this is not an ordinance change. This is not proposing anything new to the ordinance, and this is not a direct change of expansion into the ordinance. So with that being thought of, I like to point out to everybody, as comments and people are putting their heads around this, which it took myself a little bit to kind of get the full understanding and grasp of it, that this is just like Jared or Mr. I forget his last name, Swazi said, I apologize, that this is just really an interpretation. He's not proposing, he's not looking for a vote, he's not looking for any sort of approval like that. Now, there's going to be people who like or would like more added to this language or would like something taken out of this language, but that's not what this purpose is here for today. And as Supervisor Hashik has just mentioned a little bit before, as the strategy of the MCA this year, the MCD, county staff, and our supervisors and this GGC committees is to really ensure that every person in this county, which I would have imagined almost 90% that have cultivation licenses are provisional licenses right now, and they need to change into state annual licenses by January 1st of 2025. That is a major, major deadline that we all know is going to take a hell of a lot of work to get done. I feel, and I'm not, and even though that sounds like an alarm bell getting rung off, and it should be, I am actually very optimistic at the fact that county staff, county council, and our supervisors are committed towards that mission, and alongside with local stakeholder group, the MCA in particular, our regional partners and Origins Council on the state level and regional affairs is committed to getting this done, and the state itself. We're already past the first quarter of this year. We're almost hitting the halfway point of this year, and we haven't unfortunately even started the process with the EIA. This is going to take up an extreme dedication to get that done. The reason why I'm saying that is because of now, I know this is probably going to be a little bit of a tidbit of wanting to opening up the can or the discussion towards expansion in the county here, and we just can't do it at this time. It doesn't make any strategic sense. It is a heck of a process. Any ordinance change is a multiple month process that takes up time and resources that we need to make sure we allocate for this EIR discussion and affair. So, I'd like everyone, who's listening to the public to understand that concept and understand the prioritization here. And I do feel that these topics should be discussed and should be explored. And things such as considering cannabis as agriculture and all that, once we have a completed EIR in this county, and everybody has the ability that when they go to renew their state licenses in 2025, they're able to turn them from provisional licenses into state annual licenses. Otherwise, all the time, energy, investment, budget deficit that was put towards this, all these grants, everything would be lost if these people lose their ability to cultivate in this state of California. And rather than trying to hope that we can beg for an exception at some point from the state to give us more time and such, let's be the exception. Let's work together. Let's get this done. Let's understand this at this point. This is, as I said earlier, this is just an interpretation of pre-existing language. I've heard multiple people have told me this. Myself has read it this way for many years and thought I was just speaking in the wind and was possibly crazy. But it's plain language, folks. This is just a pure, logical way of looking at already created language that is in the ordinance. I understand that some people might be upset by this and feel it's unfair, it's unequitable. This can be brought up and can be changed at a future date and time. This is not that day or time to do that. Thank you very much for that time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that the point well taken is that this is not an expansion item. It's not. We're not going to open up the ordinance to look at that, or we're just going to go with the interpretation of what the department and county councils is saying is the right way to read it. So with that, really, I'm going to keep people to 3 minutes because we have other work to do today too. Okay, Ms. Powell.
Thank you, Corinne Powell speaking. I am in complete agreement with Steve regarding allocation of priorities toward annual licenses. I hope that we can table this new interpretation that's explained here really with a rationale in a couple of paragraphs. It's much more complex than that. I think it's a travesty if the intentions of the ordinance as written in 2017, and none of you were here then, to understand that a limitation on square footage equitably applied to various license types was the objective. This changes all that if resource lands are excluded, and I think that that will be a very difficult choice for the county to make and therefore should not be made. If there is going to be a multiple license option, I think it should be applied to all parcels where cultivation is allowed based on the zone itself, not a caveat added that resource lands will not allow any type of increase in cultivation sizes. I have a couple of things just to pose that this particular new interpretation is going to involve. For example, you now have two viable permits. Let's say there are two different types of cultivation. Are both sites going to be individual? Are both sites going to be inspected differently? Can both licenses share the infrastructure in a way that doesn't mean things have to be duplicit? I've got lots of questions about how this might roll out. So I think at this juncture, if we can table progressing with a double license system, it will be to everyone's benefit.
Supervisor McGordy.
Well, I'm inclined to agree. We finally got the chaos down to a manageable level. So I don't think we want to open up a new can of worms. But with that being said, and you know, it's here, okay? So it's already sort of defined. And me personally, I always thought that cannabis should be on ag land, and if we were going to expand the industry, that was a logical place to go. It's flat, impacts are minimal, there's water in most cases, and at the moment in the wine grape industry, some land is opening up. But we're not going to debate that today because I think that we have enough on our agenda. I just wanted to make that comment that this is an interesting development. But I think it is smart for us just to go ahead and let's take care of the workload we have on our desk right now before we start opening it up to anything else.
Okay, are there any comments online? Are you done? No?
More comment, just that is a possibility and potentially an unexpected consequence, and that is if you have two parcels next to each other, one's on rangeland and one's on ag land, the rangeland guy is now not eligible for this new interpretation, and their land value is potentially negatively impacted with no other reason except that that's the way the county has created zones. So keep that in mind too, because I think it's a serious concern.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and I've seen situations where the land designation was decided by what was going on at the time. So there, in Potter Valley, I know places where people were running cattle and people had a vineyard, and when they went through finally coming up with a zoning map for Mendocino County, they kind of went on what was going on with the land, not necessarily on what the land capability was. So understand there's going to be a lot to this, and that's why I think this is best tabled to another time.
Okay, Monique Ramirez.
Thank you, Monique Ramirez, District 3. I feel really frustrated by this because I feel like it doesn't feel like this was the intent of the ordinance when it was drafted, to allow like basically a larger square footage for phase 3, and it feels like, how did we miss that? If that is the actual language and that is the interpretation, it doesn't seem like that was what we intended as we all came up with this. So I feel kind of like, whoa. And also that it, does affect only the people with phase 3 zoning clearances basically to do it. And like all the phase 1 people, once again, are like, if you're in the wrong zoning, you're screwed and you can't cultivate more and you're stuck. And like, I'm not a person that wants to see expansion. I also feel frustrated just from an environmental perspective because we're basically like encouraging people to do like use electricity to grow cannabis. We're encouraging people to potentially even do an indoor if they already have an outdoor, because this is like, you get to have a second license, but it has to be of a different type from what I'm understanding. And, if we're looking just on the heels of Earth Day just happening, we really have to think about the long-term longevity of our earth and how we cultivate all crops and not just cannabis. So I'm kind of discouraged by this. And yet, if this is the ordinance language, there's a lot of other things that we have not interpreted correctly and have been shunned away from when we brought them forward, about interpretations. And I get that like the EIR is the most important topic right now. And for any cultivator that's already going through that process, like to even contemplate expanding is kind of crazy. I don't think you'd even get through in time to make it happen. So I totally support us not like going down that rabbit hole. But at the same time, it's like, well, why are we even bringing this up right now if we're not really going to have like a fruitful discussion about it? And where does this really lead us in the end? And it just opens the door now for people to come forward with more applications to increase their square footage. And it just doesn't sit well with me as a legacy operator that's been in this process from day one and has seen all of the iterations as you all have as well. It just feels frustrating to me. So I just want to say that. And just feel disappointed. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Five 225.
Hi there, this is Hannah Nelson calling in from approaching the airport, and thank you for taking the time. I just want to reiterate some of the items that Steve Amato said, and also point out that for those who are modifying their phase 1 licenses to change it from a nursery type, which is already allowed under the ordinance, a second license under the ordinance, they would still need to apply for a new state license, and they will have to wait and wait until they can start cultivating the new type of license type until they have received an annual state license. So I think that regardless of whether there's concern about this or not, first off, if it's the plain language of the ordinance, and second off, whether it's phase one modified to a different license type as the second license on the same parcel, or if it's a new application of a phase three, either way, the new cultivation style would not be able to start until after a state annual license has been obtained, and that's going to take a lot longer at this point. So I think that there's not a cause to fear immediate proliferation of additional cultivation, and it's apparently already allowed under the current language of the ordinance. Thanks.
All right. Any other online comments? Okay, seeing no further comments from the room. Let's see. So this is an informational item. The department doesn't need any further instruction. Supervisor McGorty, you were saying you wanted to table this. How do we deal with that?
So I would make a motion that we table any further consideration of this item until next year, after we've gone through our critical deadlines with the EIR and any other licensing issues that we presently are dealing with.
So, let's see.
Just accept this as an informational report.
I guess if the interpretation of the ordinance is that you could apply for two, then can we say you can't apply for two or you have to wait until next year, or how do we deal with that? And I'll look to County Council. Ross.
Good morning, James Ross, Interim County Council. Through the chair, if I may. First, I'll defer to staff and Mr. Schwass since they have a longer history with this subject matter than I do. But as I understand it, the department was asked to consider whether or not its application of the ordinance was in accordance with the terms of the ordinance. They looked at their interpretation and how it had been applied and realized that their policy or their guidelines about what could happen under these circumstances needed to be changed in accordance with the express terms of the ordinance. If there needs to be a change in that policy or that process, the methodology for doing that would be an amendment to the ordinance. This is merely an informational item, trying to let this committee know that they were asked to look at it, they looked at it, and realized that based on this plain terms of the ordinance, a different interpretation than had been applied in the past was appropriate.
So I think that what I'm hearing is that the path of least resistance or least effort would be just to allow this to be the interpretation. Otherwise, we need to make some change to the ordinance.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, so Supervisor McGorty, are you all right with letting it stand as is?
I am. I just don't want to start, any extra work on an already overloaded department for new applications. So I don't know if you can do that. I mean, both of our counselors, is that because the ordinance exists and it's allowable, does that mean we have to honor it right now? Or can we set a policy that we're not going to add more than one license per parcel until we get through our backlog of existing provisional licenses.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Excuse me if this is sort of treading ground previously tread, but in general, the hierarchy of actions by the board are ordinances, resolutions, and minute orders in that, in that direction and in that line. And so a resolution or direction by the board cannot overcome this language of the ordinance that's previously been adopted by the board. If the board were to want to consider some other options of suspending operation of an ordinance for a period of time or something like that, there may be methodology for doing that. But in my opinion, and after having looked at the interpretation proposed and discussing it with the department and with Mr. Schwass, this appears to be consistent with the plain language of the ordinance as adopted by the board at the time.
What does that mean for an applicant who would like to apply for a second license?
I think what that means is that if an applicant applies and it's consistent with the county's reading, when I say the county in this case, the department, the reading of their ordinance, then they're welcome to apply.
Okay, so is there a methodology where we could say we're not going to consider a second cannabis license this time, but we're spending the ability to apply for that, or how is that not possible?
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Is it possible to prioritize these and to say we're going to deal with the existing applications and that any phase 3 that come in would be dealt with after we deal with our phase 1 and phase 2? Mr. Burks?
Hi, John Burks, Assistant PBS Director. If I could offer a suggestion for the committee's consideration about resource management, a tool that you already have in place and use regularly with both code enforcement and PBS as a whole, is prioritizing through a policy decision of who and what gets addressed that's already in your queue. I think it's reasonable to say that if people wanted to apply under this new interpretation, that would be reasonable. However, there is likely potentially more work than the department could reasonably accomplish, which is where, to your point, Chair Hashek, that prioritization would become critical. So I think through a policy decision, may be able to regulate what gets done and in what order. That might be, you don't have to reinvent the wheel in that case. That's already something that's done in other departments. I'd just like to offer that for your consideration, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
And I think that addresses my concerns, which essentially is that let's not begin accepting multiple applications for expansion until we get what we have in the queue. Well, okay, we can accept the application, but not really act on it until we get through the queue of what we already have. So it's a priority by time issue, and we can essentially slow walk the new applications through until we're done with what we've got on our plate.
Okay. County Council.
If I may, through the chair. I think any direction of that sort invokes one of the laws of that I try to avoid violating, which is the law of unintended consequences. And
we're good at that, though, around here.
I think any consideration of that needs to be thought through carefully about what criteria, making sure that we're processing applications in a fair and timely manner. I just think that is a question that is not particularly well suited to a determination today without understanding the ramifications.
Well, and to that point, I don't know how many people are going to rush out in this present market conditions and say, wow, just what I want to do is expand by another 10,000 square feet, because that's a sizable investment, another application process, and all the related issues with it. So I'm just trying to find a way for us to report back to our board and meanwhile not disrupt a process that's finally working smoothly. I don't know what kind of impact this would have, but I think it's good for us to think in advance. And it could be just as simple as prioritization, which seems like a very smooth way to go, because it doesn't really involve a lot of changes in terms of an ordinance, policy, or anything else.
So, looking to staff, have you had inquiries about people looking to take advantage of this second CCBL? And have you thought about the workload entailed?
Yeah, so this was just published on Thursday, so I don't think that the public has really had time to consume the material and really think about what that looks like for them. So the preliminary response that we received at this point, I believe, is pretty minimal. We have received support and folks that are concerned as well about the procedure. I do want to note that phase 3 applications are an ongoing workload for the department. So even post our DCC deadline, the department would want to and should receive phase 3 applications continuously. So renewals in phase 3 are kind of the bread and butter of the future workload that we should see moving forward. Phase 3 applications are set apart in the fact that they are no longer able to apply for a provisional license with the DCC, so they would be on their own track to annual licensure, which should be made clear through the EIR. So I do want to mention that the department does have that kind of workflow already in their head, that phase 3 applications will come in. With the newest streamlined ordinance and the tiering project that was set forth, we do have the ability as the department to issue a outside of 5-year renewal at least one time. So any phase 3 applications that come in moving forward will fit into some sort of tiering category to ensure that workload moving forward is also smooth. So for what it's worth, we should receive more applications, whether it's through this procedure or just moving forward as cannabis continues in Mendocino County.
And so that workload would be dealt with by a staff person who is really already doing the phase 3, and probably wouldn't affect that flow, the other parts of the reviews and renewals and everything going on.
Yeah, so I believe that any one of our planners through MCD could take on phase 3 applications. Because phase 3 applications are not going to be provisional license holders, there is a little bit of a distinction there that they couldn't be assigned to 4-leaf and funded through grant funds. It would have to be an MCD member taking on that staff workload. As phase 3 applications come in, whether there's an influx or, maybe we don't see one for a little bit, that time and the workload associated with that review will kind of fluctuate. But again, you're looking at 25 hours for each initial phase 3 application is the time study that we've produced for that workload.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to do anything else on it? You all right?
I think we're good. It sounds like it, at this point, it fits into the normal workflow of the department, is what I'm hearing, that there's no reason to panic. Market conditions will probably dictate what happens.
All right, well then, thank you for that informational item.
Chair, if I may, I wanted to clarify items 2A and 2B. I wanted to make sure that the motion included a referral to the Board of Supervisors of the items. Is that correct? And if not, could the committee consider making that motion as well?
Yeah, certainly, and we're just, so that would be forwarding on the report from the Cannabis Department.
Yes, I think in crafting the motion, that may have been inadvertently deleted. I just wanted to make sure it was part of the
Okay.
of the approved action.
Can we include that? You made
I-
the motion.
Yes, I
I
did.
do have that recorded in the motion.
Okay, so
Thank
we're
you.
good?
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 2D, I guess. And on the agenda, it says 2C, but it's actually 2D. Discussion and possible action, including consideration of potential revisions to Mendocino County Code, Chapter 8.77, titled Hazardous Vegetation, Combustible Material, Rubbish, and Weeds. Abatement of hazardous vegetation and combustible material nuisance ordinance, and evaluating potential funding sources for implementation. So this was an issue that was brought forward about some real concerns around the county, and turns out around the state, about what can we do using the vegetation abatement ordinance to try to get people, especially people who are landowners that aren't present, that are absentee or not responsive, and we have that situation going on with some grants we have and some other nonprofits that, like fire safe councils, that have grants to do some work. And what can the county do to help facilitate the cleanup and the vegetation abatement in some of these problematic places? And so since the last meeting, I have talked to Senator McGuire's office. They were looking at it. I've talked to CSAC, their Environment Committee. And they're involved at the state level with the state fire marshal. And they have a technical advisory group that's looking at wildfire prevention. So they're going to bring that up there. They had a good presentation at the legislative conference the other day, last week, about different issues regarding some of this vegetation abatement, such. But I wasn't there, but Madeline Klein, the elected supervisor for the first district, was there, and so we're going to get together, and she's going to report back what happened there. But in the meantime, I guess supervisor, we've had some work done, and Gretchen Laughlin from Code Enforcement did a memo, and I'd like to include that memo on our agenda in the future. I haven't had the time to do that, but she did a memo of what she has researched with Lake County and some of the findings. And so we're working on it. And also there was a question or issue raised by Keith Rutledge up at the Sherwood Firewise Council, looking at some options of purchasing the land and for some of these default properties. I know the economic development team has been looking at and trying to work with the auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector about, the default properties and how they might align with strategic firefighting strategies that we might have. So there's some work being done, and Quinn Layla has also done some work and has this grant available. So hopefully we can have this discussion further today, see how to move it forward.
Okay, so as I recall, we discussed even in the lot line adjustments in places that are abandoned properties that people are behind on their tax payments. And the idea would be to try to encourage neighbors possibly to absorb some of those properties and manage them as kind of a strategy of fire prevention, like in brook trails.
Right. Yeah. So we're looking at that. We just need to get the information about what properties are being auctioned off maybe this year.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else for us to consider today at meeting?
Let's see. Gwen, do you have anything to add? We've had some discussions.
Good morning, Swen Malala, Executive Office. Yes, nothing really to add. I just want to, our Executive Office Grants Division is having a better understanding of the project and the issues at hand. We are reviewing Gretchen's memo very thoroughly. It is very extensive, a lot to digest. She is such a great researcher, but we're looking at, yeah. So we are still exploring grant opportunities, including working with HCD to maybe rescoping an existing grant project. We are looking at potentially maybe a planning project or a feasibility study. There are many ideas that are floating, a lot of questions that we are asking, hoping to come up with a project that will create a plan that will address the issues long term.
So with this repurposed grant, if we're able to do that, and have you found out with you said you had conversations with ACD?
We are working with HCD.
Yeah. So do we think that we can repurpose that grant?
Verbally, they said, yes, you can. They were really open to working with us. It came from a 2017 allocation, and it has still undersubscribed. So they do want to get the funding out, but just because it is CDBG funding, there are many requirements that we have to work with and make sure it fits in the funding parameters.
So with this, if we had grant funding, then your idea is that we could have someone who could come and develop the processes using collaboration with what Gretchen
yes, a feasibility study of come up with a plan and yes.
Okay, so how do we move that forward?
We would have to. We are still working with HCD whether our idea is allowable under their grant program, and we still have to work with the code enforcement team on their ideas. But it's moving forward, just not as quickly as we hope.
Okay. County Council, did you have anything to add to that? I know you've thought about this issue some.
Yes, James Ross, Interim County Council through the chair, if I may. I had only had an opportunity to review briefly some of the material that Ms. McLaughlin sent over. My initial review indicated that there are some distinct differences between the Lake County process and ours, and we'd have to evaluate those and see how they might impact the enforcement of that ordinance. Otherwise, a lot of it seemed to touch on many of the same issues that I touched on at our previous meeting, including the availability of getting inspection warrants and things of that nature. I am continually monitoring this topic. It's a very hot topic amongst counties, large, small, rural, urban. So we are monitoring it to see if there's any new developments.
Supervisor McGordy.
I think that this is something critical for us in another arena, which is getting fire insurance in some of our rural areas. And I think that the state's starting to pressure the insurance industry as we implement ordinances that require defensible space and improvements or hardening of people's structures to keep it from burning. So this has a lot of implications on the ability to buy and sell real estate in rural areas of Mendocino County. So this is something I think we definitely want to prioritize.
And if I may, through the chair, in response to Mr. McGordy's comments, yes, that's absolutely correct. This is sort of goes hand in hand with the issue of fire insurance in the state of California, and that is a critical issue. It is also a hot topic from large to small, rural to urban. I don't want to say too much further because it's not ready for prime time, but myself and some of my colleagues have been exploring a rather novel idea about maybe how to move some of this along. But again, because I don't want to violate the law of unintended consequences, it's not ready for prime time, but if it becomes ready, I'll share it with you.
Mr. Burks, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
I do have a question for Mr. Burks, and this has to do with the kind of combustible material, rubbish issues that code enforcement also addresses, which I've requested some assistance from code enforcement, and they've been pretty responsive. And I just would like you to talk just a bit about that, about what's actually available if someone's creating a nuisance of combustible materials in their neighborhood.
Yes, hi, John Burks, Assistant Planning and Building Services Director. If I may respond to that question through the chair, please. Yeah, so code enforcement, the primary tool that they use is declaration of a nuisance, which does have lasting implications about what the county's responsibilities are to abate that if that declaration. In the ordinance as it is right now, there's a bit of reliance on sort of a fire professional's declaration that it is in fact hazardous for fire reasons. And that's why Lake County paired with their, I don't know if it's a fire marshal technically, but they have somebody on staff that I believe can speak to any actual declarations regarding fire concerns in the unincorporated area of the county, whereas we're unique because we have many different fire jurisdictions. So we don't have that united voice right now to make that declaration to then request the assistance of code enforcement. But, we, as sort of the biggest tool in the toolbox is a nuisance declaration. But like I say, that does have certain implications that once we expel, there's an expectation that, if the property owner doesn't abate it, that the county will. So law of unintended consequences, it becomes a bit of a resource management game at that point with how it's structured right now. So code enforcement's happy to take the complaints and log them, but typically what would happen if we got a hazardous vegetation complaint at this moment in time, it would be likely referred to the local fire agency, whomever that may be, because they still have the authority, in some capacity to address those, but they may or may not be in any better shape than we are, especially with the volunteer fire districts. That creates a pretty large burden. So it's a bit of a tricky circumstance. And I hope that answered your question in terms of what the tools are right now to try to address these.
It really does. And the key part being having a fire professional be able to assess is this something that really constitutes a hazard.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty consistent in a lot of jurisdictions, that they will have either a county fire marshal or a partnership with, I think the Firewise Council also was considering making a presentation for, some unified voice for all of the independent fire districts. That's likely going to be something that, we'll figure out one way or another eventually. I suspect that maybe through the grants division's efforts, that pathway may open up, or at least that's our hope. And I know that they've been working on options for that for years. Actually, Supervisor had spoken to that at previous board meetings about the efforts being made by the fire community to create that united, which would benefit the county either way. Whoever's first to the finish line, I think it's going to be a win for the county. It doesn't how that formula.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe we have to have a discussion with the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council to see what resources they have from the Measure P and see if they can step up. We've heard this talk about the Fire Chiefs Association for a long time and haven't seen anything, or we need to start pursuing other pathways too.
Well, we do. There's always got to be a person who's knowledgeable and authoritative to be able to look at what's perceived as a hazard, determine that yes it is, no it isn't, and just as we You know, what we do with tree hazards is that you look at the tree that might be a problematic and think, if this came down, what would happen? And we sort of need to look at fire the same way. If this caught fire, what would happen? And if it's in the middle of somebody's 280-acre parcel of rangeland, quite different than if it's in a neighborhood, you know, like Brook Trail. So we have to think strategically, because we can't use the same level of care or prevention in all instances.
Mr. Ross.
Through the chair, if I may, on the discussion of, you know, fire professionals, my understanding in Lake County is that they work with the Lake County Fire Protection District, which has a fire marshal. That person may actually, I'm not 100% sure, but they may actually act in the capacity of the fire official for Lake County itself. Shasta County, for example, through a contract with CAL FIRE, a CAL FIRE individual would work as the fire official for the county. And in Ventura County, which I'm pretty familiar with how their system operates, they have a fire protection district that essentially encompasses the entire county. The county is the same boundaries as the fire protection district, so they operate through their own, you know, they cover the entire territory. Their fire marshal handles those duties.
All right. So for next steps, when do you think that for the next meeting, you can come back with some kind of idea or a plan with the grants? Okay. Do we need to have a meeting set up for next time with code enforcement, or how do you think we move forward with this?
So I'm Malala, Executive Office. Our next step is, or continue to work with HCD to see what kind of projects are eligible under the guidelines, and we will meet internally with code enforcement staff to get their, vision ideas.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Burks.
Yes, John Burks, Assistant Planning and Building Service Director. Thank you for allowing me to come up here again. And I would say I'd like to just put a big shout out there to Gretchen, who has done a tremendous amount of research in this and many other areas in code enforcement. So I just wanted to say thanks, Gretchen. She is attending virtually today if she did answer any questions. But I think that with the grants division, once they understand what the parameters that we can operate in, it would be worth considering having Code Enforcement Manager McLaughlin provide additional analysis, being as that she's already done some of that within those parameters, to see if there's something that we can do. So to Schwinn's point about having some of those internal conversations, I think that likely is going to happen fairly organically, and I hope that that informs the broader discussion, especially depending on what Interim County Counsel Ross is able to find in terms of pathways if he's got the ability to do that. So that was just my.
Okay, thank you. And certainly we appreciate what Gretchen's done with code enforcement. Her memo and thoughts on this.
Well, on that basis, I would move the recommended action.
Well, let's see. Okay. And I'll second it, but let's go to public comment. Public comment?
Seeing none online.
Okay. All right. So recommended action's been moved and seconded.
Supervisor Hashek?
Yes.
Supervisor McCourty?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, and I think that we need to approve the minutes from the
Yes.
February 28th meeting.
Move the recommended action.
On item 3A?
Yes.
Okay, second. Any public comment?
Seeing none online.
Okay.
Supervisor McCourty?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashek?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, public expression, item 3B. Public for comment?
Seeing one online, Paul Hansberry.
Okay. Mr. Hansberry.
Hello, it's Paul Hansberry. Yes, hello. Just quickly, it seems to me, when you were talking about the ability of the department to make the decision, it seems to me that under the previous director, that there was a resolution passed that would gave the director the authority to make those kinds of decisions, and all they had to do was notify the board and establish it on the website. That was before the current county council tenure, so he may not be familiar with that, but I think that does give the authority. I know you were talking about whether the department had the ability to make the decisions without the board's, bringing it before the board, but I think that resolution would cover that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Paul, for that reminder. It certainly, I remember that well. All right.
Seeing no further comment online.
Okay, so any announcements? All right, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 11:50. Thank you, everybody.